What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and you might know me from my riveting series of business guides, How to Piss Off Just About Everyone, a guide to video game microtransactions with a special forward by 2K Games. But I also do video game reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And today I'm absolutely stoked to be taking a gorgeous gallivant through the sedate Transformer world title known as Hob from Runic Games, published by Runic Games and distinctly not like Runic Games' past titles. Let's see if Abzu Above Ground, as I like to call it, turned out to be a good title, or if everyone playing it is simply going to wonder, where in the hell is Torchlight 3? Let's get to it. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Hob, Celine Dion Aliens, The Last of Us Creepy Giraffe Edition, and a hat so cool, hey, you know what? It's got 2 price tags. Graphics are up first. If there's one thing, and there's actually more, that Hob has going for it, it is the fact that it has wholly embraced the transformation ideology of its core. The entire world just shifts and transforms around you, with most of your actions having huge pillars of stone and steel tearing out of the ground to bring you to completely unique and new locations. And it's not that Michael Bay bullcrap where 1 million moving pieces are all shifting in place like a goddamned LSD dream. This is more brutal, it's guttural, it's like tearing up the land one continental shelf at a time and then slamming it back down the way it probably should be. From the very moment you're altered graved right out of your starting tomb, there's something both mechanical and ethereal that's going on in Hob, from the unique grid-like patterns of the vine climbways to the glowing globular alien foliage that has really festooned itself all over the game world. There's a dichotomy of nature and mechanical that really plays well here, most likely because the developers didn't go high-tech, but more of a steampunk with questionable machines driven by stone and steel and gears, and questionably maintained steam pipes. It really looks like nothing else out there, even if we have seen these kind of art designs in other places. Now, I also have to say, while the enemies aren't exactly numerous, nor are they all that unique, there are some standouts, like the freakish bomber bugs who throw bug grenades at you from far off and look like they're chewing off the tail as the timer, or the long-limbed giants who swing and move in such a way that you keep looking at them and thinking, how is that thing moving even possible? To me, it actually looks like a mixture of the 1970s wizard cartoon mixed with an adventure that Bob Ross would have made if he hadn't been called up to paint happy clouds for God. And one of the first things that I noticed in Hob that I really actually found strangely gratifying is that whether I was chopping through huge fields of grass, all of them reacting to wind patterns and creatures tracking you, or I was climbing up monolithic structures in underground dungeons, I never felt completely lost. It's not a game where puzzling out where to go is really high in the agenda. Instead, it's more about what you do once you get there, and the game doles out areas and you sort of realize that maybe you need to supply some power to some switch or a transformer. There is this unique free flow that goes on within Hob that I haven't really felt before, and graphically, there's something incredibly informative about it, and I think those two sandwich together. Also, I have to say the color choice here, it doesn't really matter what's going on, but especially the somewhat ugly yellows that we've seen in some other games, here they have this nice warm glow to them that works to paint Hob in a unique light, whether it be the purples and blues of stone or that copper look of the rung of a ladder. It is really well done color choice. Sadly, the game has some issues, especially with performance in this version, and they all stem from frame rate, which I was informed would be fixed prior to release. The game had some fairly frequent drops to the low 50s from its targeted 60 FPS, and this was usually in new areas that had just loaded or in areas with a heavy amount of graphical effects like fields with tons of glowing pollen-like bits in the air. Now, it never affected gameplay, but you can see it in some of the footage here, and that was even when running at 1080p on the i7 at 4.2 and a GTX 1080. And while I do love the blunt and stylized texture work, for the most part, many of the grassland areas really seemed technically and noticeably bland in their ground texture. And while obviously a choice from the designers, I can't help but think it could have done with a bit more detail to draw the eye. As a package, though, I have to say, I love the way the game looks, and Old Scratch himself has a fantastic gait to him as he trods along with an arm that would make Hellboy change colors from jealousy, even if I'm not necessarily happy with the FPS drops. Sound, music, and voice. You know what? Let's do music first. Now, Matt Ullman delivers one of the most, if not the most, ethereal and almost not their soundtracks I think I have heard in years. At first, it's easy to think, man, this game's actually got no soundtrack. But then in particular moments, like the time you sit Hob down from a vantage point to sort of take a look at the, oh shit, I have to get over there grandeur of some new location, the music sort of flits in. But it's almost always accompanied by this hush, like the instruments are playing up above everything else, piping down like audio puppet strings to the world around it. From little guitar ditties to distant woodwinds, it all feels separated just a bit, and that's on purpose. I mean, let's be honest, I've talked about this multiple times. Sometimes a game will make you feel like the music is right there, like a friggin' big band follows the main character around everywhere, just ready to burst into some trumpets every time you do some cool shit. Well, Matt's soundtrack is absolutely, undeniably not that. It's the opposite of that. But I could see some actually complain that it's a little too far removed, both in amount and just the choice of the effects. When I started the game, I would have actually agreed with them. But the more I played, the more the overarching spiritual soundtrack idea really hammered home just what was happening in the game in the first place. I liked it a lot, but I can see a large number of gamers really wondering what the idea was here and maybe wondering if it hit it off at all. Let's talk about voice. So they call this a voiceless adventure, and yeah, it pretty much is, aside from the character that you see from time to time who grunts in this cool mechanized I'm saying crap that matters but you don't really understand it because you don't have Google Translate kind of voiceovers, as well as singing creatures and various other aliens that voice different bits of the inhabitants. So while it's called voiceless, technically, there's actually a great deal being said here if you just sit back and listen. Sound. Now, if there's one thing not missing from Hob, it's processing on its sound effects and coming out of the mysterious confines of some cored out massive redwood tree trunk into an open plain, and hearing that fade off of echo and reverb is fantastic stuff, even if, for some people, it actually might be a little heavy. But for me, I really like the environmental layers here, like the far-off chirps of birds and the heavy, almost at times overpowering presence of the wind in the game. It does wonders to solidify the fiction these devs are really trying to represent. Also, I have to say bravo for having so much depth in some of the sounds. We all know what it's like to be running around as a character and it sounds like a board hitting a stone, and that's pretty much it for, let's say, footsteps. No actual definition or layering or really movement. But Hob does this a great deal. Chop through the grass and there's distinct layers to the sound, like it's really hitting through a thick material or many small amounts of a material, or the weird hollow wood and steel sound if you accidentally mistime an enemy's block. To me, there's a dynamic feel to a lot of these and I really like it. However, there are some issues. First, sometimes the audio just does not play for a hit sound on an enemy. The enemy turns into 1,000 juicy bits of once-breathing blueberry sauce, and that's great, but the hit sound is actually just strangely missing. Now, this happened more than once, but as a package, pretty good sound. Gameplay. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but Hob starts out like every one of my Saturday mornings with a giant friggin' one-eyed robot opening the door to my room and me walking out into an alien vista. And then boom, nothing. Because the game doesn't tell you anything at all. Nothing at the start. You just walk out and begin. We've seen games like this before, where Abzu had you gliding around the underwater game world, and while making changes, it was more about moving forward and figuring out the mystery to mystery. Much of Hob is this strange, someone put together a jigsaw puzzle wrong, and you're there to fix it kind of motif. And then when you've done something, probably still looking back and going, yeah, I'm not really sure that's even right, but it looked cool. I mean, you're going to find a place to upgrade your weapon before you find a weapon, and while it can appear clumsy at the starting in its presentation, it absolutely blossoms from there, and there's some reasons for this. And I admit, the first half an hour I was like, is there a glitch in the abilities and skills list? And then I realized, nope, it's all glyph-based, and what appears to be an empty, unloading page is really just having absolutely nothing cool to report to you. And Hob at times uses negative space to an incredible degree to pass information to the gamer about where to go, what's missing, and what to do. But at times, I could see people feeling it's a little unfinished in a couple areas. Soon, though, you're going to be running around the game world and finding out what seems to be an infected world with a strange alien menace as well as a robotic force both bent on your destruction. And that's where the duality here really starts to shine. The feeling of nature and strange future sort of merging and bumping into one another is really driven home the first time you transform even a small area or go into a dungeon, and the game's heavy reliance on mystery sort of opens up in front of you. Now, some may not like it, I can see that, and I don't think anyone could blame them for it. But for me, the size, the grandeur, and the changing game world absolutely pulled me in. The game also has a very nice checkpoint system, as well as a location-based Steam magic elevator that can scotty you to other locations in the game world without really having to cross back if you don't want to, and I like that. Now, when it comes to weapons and such, basically you're going to be running around this game world gathering different sword pieces from what looks like following travelers like yourself, as well as various points to upgrade your abilities, to add sword strikes, more punches, give you the ability to zip around the game world, or change your cloak for something else if it fits your game style. And make no mistake, this isn't a game about waylaying a ton of creatures. It's far more, like I said, Journey or Abzu, and that kind of style of title. And hell, some of the creatures don't even attack you, but if you kill them, they drop apples, which replenish health. And it can feel like that weird dichotomy of, do I do this because I sort of feel bad about it, or do I just kill everything on the screen? Now, the game's about 6 to 8 hours, and if you play on the harder difficulties, the enemies you do meet will not be pushovers, especially the larger ones that can quickly trap you and kill you with 1 to 2 strikes instantly, turning you into yesterday's funny story the bad guys probably tell around a campfire. And you know what? All this would fall apart if Hob didn't have what, to me at least, is some of the better or best control for a game like this in a long time. They nailed it. It's absolutely natural, it's instinctive, and even when you're sprinting across thin stone buttresses looking over massive chasms or timing a roll to slide under an enemy's spread, it just feels incredibly dialed in. It's rare that a game, to me at least, feels like this in this department. Combat is also fairly slick, though I wish 1 or 2 maneuvers were just a little bit faster. I get why it's not. You have a character who's basically running around with a 100-pound dumbbell for a hand, but at times there were particular moves where I was like, man, he's just a little slower than I would like. Sadly, the camera is not as good as anything else in the game. It's passable and it works almost all the time to an amount, but there are times where there's lack of good transparencies for blocking objects, like let's say Original Sin 1 and 2 do so well, and you can sometimes feel a bit stymied because you might die, and not because you did anything wrong, but because you couldn't see a goddamn thing. Regardless of that, Hob rises above it. I liked Abzu for the journey it offered, and Journey for, well, the journey it offered. But where Hob grabbed me and never really let me go was the sense of just a little bit farther gameplay and incredibly epic use of verticality. It doesn't matter if it's you, enemies, pylon structures, walls, land you're on, land someone else is on, or the entire game world. The massive amount of vertical movement, both triggered by puzzle as well as just traveled via your getaway sticks, is beyond impressive. It makes the game feel huge, and sometimes you're going to get these weird glances of things going on underneath the ground. I'd say this, as a package, Hob is one of the more unique exploration games, and where each title's chosen the way in which it progresses and how that's measured, Hob has chosen overall worldview as its main indicator, and for me, that works. For others, though, I can see them having a couple issues here, especially the lack of more variety when it comes to the enemies. Fun factor. You know, I had a blast. The speed of this thing is just great, and sprinting across an ancient bridge, grabbing onto a ladder, and hightailing it up into the stratosphere is such a cool feeling. But make no mistake, this isn't anything like Torchlight. It's not that kind of action-heavy, fun, mono-y-mono style, and that's one of the games I absolutely loved. You guys know it. This is a cerebral play on a world made by some crazy Jenga master, and while that speaks to me, I can see it really not resonating with some of their core audience. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep, deep sale on PC. For me, at $17.99, this is a buy, but I liked Abzu, and I like Journey, and I love those kind of games if done well. Its controls rock solid, and despite those FPS issues, its worldview is easily one of the most interesting just visually that I've played in a great deal of time. But make no mistake, if you're not a fan of these games, Hob's not going to make you feel like that. So if you don't check the boxes, then you probably won't even be wanting to get this at all. But to me, $17.99, it's well worth the almost 8 hours of gameplay. So that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. And remember, now on the YouTube gaming side, you can go there and you can actually sponsor the channel through YouTube if you are not a fan of Patreon. Otherwise, maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. Maybe check out the Reddit page. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.